A new report out this morning is illustrating the growing reliance Canadians have on food banks. Feed Ontario's 2022 Hunger Report looks at food bank usage figures between April 2021 and March 2022, and it finds that during that time frame, more than 500,000 adults and children used an Ontario food bank. That's an increase of 15% over the last 3 years. When asked why they needed to use a food bank, almost half said the cost of food. 13% cited the cost of housing, and about 10% said their wages were too low or they weren't getting enough hours at work. With me now is Carolyn Stewart, Executive Director at Feed Ontario. Carolyn, good morning. Glad you could be with us. So first of all, give us your perspective on these numbers that we're talking about this morning from this report. Nearly 500,000, more than 500,000 people using a food bank in Ontario alone.
Yeah, everyone should be incredibly concerned with the numbers revealed in this year's hunger report. Food bank use has been on the rise for 6 straight years as we see the financial health of Ontarians decline. The fact that so many people are relying on emergency food support to get by should be worrying all of us. Food banks were developed in the 80s as a short-term response, and they were never really intended to be a lasting solution to poverty. And here we are in 2022 with almost 600,000 people accessing our services over 4.3 million times. And really what's even more concerning is this year's report revealed that we've seen a 64% increase in first-time visitors since 2019, which we believe really points to the lack of quality employment opportunities here in Ontario, and that the disinvestments in social supports are really driving this growth.
Let's talk a bit more about who is most affected by food insecurity.
Unfortunately, hunger doesn't discriminate. So we see people from all walks of life in all communities. So single and two-person families, children represent 30% of those that we service. We've seen an increasing number of seniors, as well as those who are employed. In fact, we've seen a 40% increase or over 40% increase in employed individuals accessing food bank services since 2018, which is really showing everybody that today's income is just insufficient to meet your most basic needs. People are being asked to stretch an already stretched dollar, and when they can't make ends meet, are having to turn to food banks for support.
Carolyn, the Christmas holidays are coming up. What are food banks doing now to prepare for the demand?
Food banks are working as hard as ever to make sure that they can meet the demand in their community. But part of what we want to make sure we're talking about today is that we are concerned that demand at some point may outpace capacity of the food bank network. So, in a lot of circumstances, food banks normally have 2 to 3 months worth of inventory at their food bank, but are now only seeing about 2 to 3 weeks because the need is so great. So we really need to be asking ourselves where we want to be in 30 more years. Do we want to see these numbers doubles, or do we want to say this year was the year that we took a stand and ensured that good public policy was implemented to make sure the numbers of people accessing food banks started to reduce?
How do food banks stock their shelves? Where does the food come from?
Yeah, so from a variety of sources, corporate donors or companies who have access for whatever reason, retail partners, but also generous individual donors who are either donating food product or funds to be able to purchase the food that's needed for the community. Oftentimes, funds are great because it allows to ensure that food banks are able to really provide those niche needs of clients, potentially dietary restriction or culturally appropriate foods. And then on top of that, just food they may not be receiving through donations. So we are seeing, unfortunately, a reduction in donations right now because a lot of people who would normally be donating are feeling the pinch due to inflation and these challenging costs and times that we're feeling right now. And unfortunately, even some donors who previously had donated are in fact turning to our services for support because they just don't have enough funds right now.
Carolyn Stewart, thank you so much for speaking with us. Carolyn is the Executive Director at Feed Ontario.